Hello, welcome to Legal Aid's Introduction to the Defence and Veterans Legal Service. This webinar will be approximately 60 minutes in total, including questions at the end of the webinar. This webinar is recorded, so if you have to leave and come back, you can come back and view it again in your own time through the Legal Aid New South Wales YouTube channel. If you are having trouble hearing us over the internet, you do have the option to listen to the webinar through your telephone. You can access the phone number and access details, and they are on the control panel. They are also in the reminder email sent about an hour ago. We do apologise that there is no live captioning as we are speaking today. The recording of the webinar that is available on the Legal Aid YouTube channel will have closed captions. We'll now have a look at some of the features of the webinar control panel. So this is to let you know how to use your control panel and also how to ask questions, because we do want this to be as interactive as possible. So to ask questions, you just drop down in the questions box in the control panel, as you can see on the slide currently up. So, and you don't have to be shy when asking questions. What you type is only visible to us and not all participants. You can type in a question at any time, and if we don't answer it during the webinar, we will try to look at it at the end. Sometimes your control panel does disappear, but rest assured it hasn't. It has simply minimized. If you click on the orange or red button with the arrow, it should expand back. And just to check if you guys can hear us, would like to know where you are listening from. So please type it in the questions box where you're listening from. Would love to know, where everyone is from and what organisation you're from. So just waiting for a few to come in, just to make sure that you guys can hear us. So we have the Veteran Support Force from the Sunshine Coast. We have some people calling from Cairns, Sydney, Townsville, Forest Hill. Fantastic. That's great. Thank you so much. So just to go through the webinar again, this is an introduction to the Defence and Legal Service. The Defence and Veterans Legal Service. Our speakers in our panel today is Jasmine Santon from the Senior Project Officer of the Defence and Legal Service, the Defence and Veterans Legal Service, also known as DAVLS. Jacinta Harris, who is our solicitor from the team, and Nicholas Warren, who is our Community Engagement Officer. My name's Marina Atala, and I work in the Legal Aid's Community Legal Education team. My co-presenter, who will also moderate the questions today, is Yasmin Lewis. Yasmin also works for the Community Legal Education team at Legal Aid New South Wales. Before we begin, we would also like to acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional owners of the land we are broadcasting from today, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people listening today. So what we'll cover today in today's webinar is how DAVLS is funded and managed, who is in the team and what they can offer, how the team works, how we can work together, referral details and resources, and of course your questions at the end. During today's webinar, we will be talking about the Royal Commission into Deaths amongst Defence members and veterans. If this causes you any distress, we highly recommend you call one of the numbers on the screen. We will provide these numbers again at the end of the webinar. So Yasmin, can you tell us a bit about the Royal Commission?
Thanks, Marina. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Before I start, I'd also like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. And before I get on to this first slide, I'd also like to give you a little bit about my background and why it is that I'm passionate about this work. So back a couple of decades ago, when I first finished school, I spent 2 years at ADFA, and that was in the 1990s, and I was in the Navy. And as some of you might know, there's a try before you buy system, and then our return of service obligation kicks in. So I decided that what I was studying through the Navy wasn't for me, and I left to go to civilian university and study law, but I stayed with the Army Reserves while I was at City Uni. And over the decades, I've stayed in contact with a lot of my defence mates. And unfortunately, over the years, too many of them have died, and some of those deaths have been due to the dangerous nature of the job. And unfortunately, some of those deaths have also been by suicide. So that's what motivates me to be involved with the Defence and Veterans Legal Service. And in particular, I think it's going to be very important that this Royal Commission hears from people who have lived experience. And when I say that, what I mean by lived experience is people who are veterans or defence members, and not just the defence members and veterans, but also their families, friends and support networks. Now, this first slide is looking at what is a Royal Commission. And it's a public inquiry, and in Australia, it's the highest form of inquiry on a matter of public importance. And it's conducted by commissioners, and the commissioners are given broad powers to gather information and to compel people to produce material or give evidence. And then at the end of the inquiry, the Royal Commission produces a report, and that report has recommendations in it. So each Royal Commission, this is point 2, has terms of reference, and those terms of reference set out the key areas that are going to be investigated. And it also, the terms of reference also set out the time frame by which the inquiry must be completed. As well as saying what a Royal Commission is, I think it's also important to say what a Royal Commission is not. Oh, what happened to my slides? Oh, yeah, there we go. And it's important to note that a Royal Commission is not a court process. So it's not going to get to the bottom of individual matters or make findings that a person has committed an offence or pass judgment on any particular individual. So that's what a Royal Commission is, and also what a Royal Commission is not. Thank you. So now to talk about this Royal Commission, and this Royal Commission has been convened because there is an unacceptably high rate of suicide amongst defence members and veterans. And because of that, the Royal Commission is very keen to hear from people with lived experience. And in order to hear the experiences of people who have served, or veterans or family members who have supported people who are serving or are veterans, the Royal Commission has made it flexible for these people to engage. So we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation, but just to summarise at this point, there's a number of ways. People can make a submission. In some circumstances, they can ask for a private session with a commissioner. And there's also the option, well, not the option, but in some circumstances, the Royal Commission might select people who think that it might be worthwhile hearing further from them and may call them to be witnesses. Now, the third point on this slide, the terms of reference, and as I said before, this is basically the guidelines about what the Royal Commission is going to be investigating. And these terms of reference are incredibly broad. And I'm not going to go through all of them, because if I listed all of them, it's about 2 pages and it would take a very long time. But just picking up on some of the terms of reference that are particularly important to this group of people, some of the things that the Royal Commission is going to be looking at are systemic issues and common themes that are relevant to deaths by suicide or suicide behaviour, analysing the contributing risk factors, including posting histories, length of service, transitions from the military back to civvy life, and also questions about accessing support services. The Royal Commission is also going to be looking at the impact of ADF culture, the role of government and non-government support services, and importantly to this group, the family and social context of Defence members and veterans. So this is an extract of some of the terms of reference, as I said before, and they're incredibly broad, and that's what I hope you're going to take away from this. Now, this is the second in a series of 2 introductory webinars, and the first webinar we gave was back on the 17th of November. And at that point, the Royal Commission hadn't started sitting. But as many of you probably know, it had its ceremonial opening on the 26th of November, and we're into the first block of hearings. So I think it's important that I also say something about what we've gleaned from the Royal Commission so far. Dr. Peggy Brown, that many of you might know is one of the commissioners, has emphasised the importance of accountability and compassion when she's hearing from people who have lived experience. And when she says accountability, what she means by that is wanting to make sure that the Royal Commission comes up with recommendations that are implemented. So not just something that's theoretical, but built into those recommendations, a mechanism to make sure that they're implemented and evaluated. And another thing that we have gleaned from this first block of hearings is that all of the commissioners have emphasised just how important it is to hear from people who have lived experience. And it wasn't just the commissioners who noted that, it was also council assisting, and there was a few points at the ceremonial opening where council assisting noted that it's incredibly important to hear from people with lived experience. There's just 2 further points that council assisting made when they were giving the ceremonial opening. The first one was that they're not looking to cross-examine people who have lived experience. So that's not to say that they're not going to cross-examine any witnesses, and it may well be that there's witnesses from DVA or Defence who are cross-examined, but when they're talking about people with lived experience, those people aren't going to be cross-examined in the hearings.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. That's really insightful. Can you tell us a bit more about what the Defence and Veterans Legal Service is?
Certainly. So the Defence and Veterans Legal Service, or DAVLS, we have been set up to run alongside the Royal Commission to give anyone who wants to engage with the Royal Commission legal advice and information about what their rights and responsibilities are. So we assist anyone who wants to engage with the Royal Commission, and we're Australia-wide. And the way that we can provide our services throughout Australia is that we're an initiative of National Legal Aid. So National Legal Aid is a partnership of all the legal aid commissions throughout Australia. And we have 2 main teams, one in Queensland and one in New South Wales. And we have smaller teams throughout Australia. So if anyone throughout Australia would like legal advice, you just need to get in contact with us. We'll work out what it is that you need assistance with and then direct you to the right place. But it's never too early and never too late to come and speak with us. So if you're thinking of putting in a submission, you can talk to us about the pros and cons of that. And also, if you've already made a submission, it's not too late to speak with us. You can put in a supplementary submission or speak to us further. So that's the first dot point on this slide. The second dot point, and I can't emphasise this one enough, we're independent. And by that, I mean we're independent of the Royal Commission. We're also independent of Defence and also independent of DVA, the Attorney General's Department, and any other government entity. So a quick word about our funding. Even though we're funded by the Commonwealth Attorney General's Department, We are separate from the Attorney General's Department, so even though we might give them information which is de-identified just about the number of people that we've assisted, anything that you say to us is private and confidential and covered by client legal privilege. The next point is that we're free. So by that, I mean that there's no means test, no merit test, and there's also no other eligibility tests. So we can help anyone who wants to engage with the Royal Commission. And last point on this slide, we're a multidisciplinary team. So what we mean by that is that we don't just have lawyers in our team, we also have a social worker and, well, that's the big one, social workers. And that's in recognition that making the decision to engage with the Royal Commission is a very big step, and it may be quite upsetting for some people. So anyone who has any concerns in that regard can speak to our social worker, and we can help them to link in with other supports.
Well, there we
Thanks,
go.
Marina.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Yasmin. We'll now hear from Jacinta. Jacinta is the solicitor working in DAVLS. She also works for the Your Story Disability Legal Support Service, another national service, assisting people to share their story with the Disability Royal Commission. Jacinta has been working with the Your Story Disability Service for the last 15 months. So she has lots of experience advising people who are engaging with the Royal Commission. Jacinta's going to talk to us about the different ways veterans can engage with the Royal Commissions and the reasons why they might want to seek legal advice.
Thanks, Marina. So what I wanted to firstly cover off on is, yes, a couple of these basic ways to engage with the Royal Commission and provide a bit more information about how you can do that. I would like to reiterate at the start, though, that part of our job is to help people to understand their options. So if you have any further questions as we go along, please don't hesitate to pop them in the chat, or you can book in for an advice appointment with myself or one of the other solicitors, and we can answer your questions and go into this information in more depth. But as Jasmine's prefaced, the first way to engage with the Royal Commission is by making a submission. For this Royal Commission, there's one form for all submissions, and this form's available on the Royal Commission website. You can either fill it out online, or you can download a copy and fill it out, or you can request a paper copy be posted to you. When you fill it out, you can provide as much or as little information as you wish. And the Royal Commission is currently accepting submissions up until October 2022. So there's plenty of time to get your submissions in. What I always like to emphasize to my clients is, as I said, you can provide as much or as little information as you want. The Royal Commission, as Jasmine said, is seeking to hear about people's lived experience if possible. They understand that there is an extremely high rate of suicide amongst the defence and veteran community, and so any information that you can provide that helps to shed light on that issue is important. You don't have to provide dates and details should you not wish to. It's absolutely not a requirement. It's really up to you. As Jasmine said before, the terms of reference are very broad and you don't have to speak to all of them. You can just pick one if you like. If you're not sure if your story fits within the terms of reference, you can give us a call and we can have a chat to you. You can make one submission on all of your issues, all the issues that relate to the terms of reference, or separate submissions. It's up to you. And you can share a story about someone else or an experience that you saw someone go through, because your perspective on the issue is just as valuable as it helps to shed light on it from a completely different angle. It doesn't matter if you've participated in an inquest before or a Senate inquiry. We can definitely talk to you to make sure that you aren't in breach of any obligations that might apply to you as a result of participating in something in the past, but there are definitely still ways for you to engage, and we'll talk to you about those. And if in the process of drafting you have questions or you'd like some assistance, we can also help you as you put your submission together. So that's one way to engage. The second key way to engage is to register for a private session. And this is where you meet with one of the commissioners and they can either be in person or by video or telephone, and you can talk to them about your experience. We can talk to you about this process and support you through the process if you'd be interested. There are particular legal protections that apply for individuals who do private sessions and stronger protections in relation to confidentiality. So for anyone who is quite concerned about their information being accessed or anyone finding out what they're saying, we can talk to you about what protections are available with a private session, as these are very, very popular for that reason. Now, having said that they are popular, people are prioritised for private sessions when they have lived experience of suicide behaviours or if they're a family member of someone who has died by suicide or experienced suicide risk factors and behaviours. So when you register for a private session, which you can do online, you need to provide a little blurb about why you're seeking a private session. It doesn't need to be extensive. It's just enough for them to understand whether you fit really what they're looking for, which is that lived experience or a close family member of someone with lived experience. Advocates who want to speak about someone else's experience aren't eligible for private sessions, but can still make submissions, and we can talk to you more about that if you've got questions. One point I'd like to make quite clear is that regardless of whether you're sharing information in a private session or in a submission, you aren't giving evidence per se in the same way you would in a court or in a public hearing. And this means there's no standard of proof or burden of proof. In other words, you don't have to prove your story. You don't have to have documents and evidence to back up every point. It's really just about telling the Commission your experience and your recommendations for change in your own words. So this means if you have supporting documents that you want the Royal Commission to see, you can provide them and we can have a chat to you if you've got any concerns about sharing documents. But really, we would strongly like people to be aware you don't have to provide documents. You do not have to be doing freedom of information requests to obtain documents. It's really just about showing the Royal Commission your story, and it will be accepted as your account of your experience. And if the Royal Commission wants to get more information from you, they can, but yes, there is no need to be going to extreme lengths or feeling like you have to go to extreme lengths to prove your story. Finally, you can engage with the Royal Commission by speaking as a witness at a public hearing. When you're speaking at a public hearing, you are actually giving evidence, so there are procedural rules that apply. Critically, though, not everyone can speak as a witness. The Office of the Solicitor Assisting, who work with the Royal Commission, they select their witnesses, and they do so based on people's submissions that they've put in. So they'll look at people's submissions and see who's got evidence that they might want to draw out in further detail at a public hearing. If you would like to be a witness, you can certainly express your interest, either when you send in your submission or you can email their inquiries line to say you'd like to be a witness, but there's no guarantee that you would be. Equally, you won't be forced to be a witness against your will. As Jasmine prefaced earlier, the Royal Commission does have powers to compel people to appear and to give evidence, but they're only going to exercise this power against people who they need to hear it from and who might not otherwise want to appear, such as DBA. If you are, however, going to appear as a witness, you'll have time to prepare and we can assist you to get a lawyer to support you throughout the process, so they will help you and you won't be on your own. If you are selected to appear as a witness, please get in touch with us so that we can link you in with a free lawyer, as well as provide you with legal advice about your rights.
That's really informative. Thank you so much. Jacinta, why would someone thinking about engaging with the Royal Commission seek legal advice?
So there are a number of really important reasons why people should think about getting legal advice before making a submission. We are there to help and support people and to encourage and empower people to make sure they're telling their story safely. So you don't have to speak to us before sharing information, but we're there if you'd like to. We can speak to you about if you'd like to know how to keep your story private and confidential. Some people want their stories public. For others, it's very important that they know that the Royal Commission receives that information and it doesn't then go anywhere else. So we can talk to you about steps you can take to make sure information is only used by the Commission and not published outside. Similarly, we can talk to you about what happens after the Royal Commission ends. So if you're worried about someone being able to access your submission and whether it could be accessed by freedom of information or by subpoena, we can give you advice about that and ways to protect that from not being able to happen if that's a concern. Particularly for people who are worried because they're involved in ongoing legal proceedings or if they are still working for defence. So yes, talking about how to keep your story private and inaccessible, definitely a key issue. For individuals who want to share stories about other people, we would encourage you to speak to us because there are some ethical and legal points to consider when you're speaking about someone else's story, particularly if they can't consent or don't consent. We can also talk to you about if you want to name someone, and I've already seen this come up with quite a few of my clients through DAVLS. Can you speak about a former major who did something to you 20 years ago? Can that person then come back and cause you any harm? Can you be liable for defamation? We can talk to you about the protections because there are protections and you can name individuals to royal commissions, but it's about doing it in a way that minimises risk to yourself. We can provide advice if you're worried about whether you can be subject to any reprisal or retribution, including in your employment as a consequence of engaging. And there are protections against being prejudiced in employment or in any other form, but there are steps that need to be taken to get them. We can also give advice in relation to rules about sharing information obtained through working with the Defence Force. As many people who work in defence know, there's quite complex legislation around sharing information pertaining to Australia's defences. And if this is a concern for you, we can work with you quite carefully to make sure that both you and us are complying with our respective obligations under the various pieces of legislation. Lastly, we can give advice if you're worried about whether you could be eligible for whistleblower protections, whether there are other rules that might prohibit you from speaking about certain matters, not necessarily relating to defence. So if you've been involved in family law proceedings or domestic violence proceedings or mental health proceedings, there are rules in relation to those proceedings that can limit what can be published. So we can talk to you about that. Similarly, if you've signed a non-disclosure agreement and want to know if you can still talk to the Royal Commission, we can help you out. Also, if you've got documents or records and you're not sure if you can share them. So that's not a summary of everything, but it is just a highlight of some of the issues we find we're regularly speaking to people about. Critically, however, we can only provide legal advice about the Royal Commission and about engaging with the Royal Commission. We can't provide advice on other legal matters such as personal injury, how to get, how to take someone to court for having done something to you, and how to get compensation. We can't assist or advise. Because we're run through legal aid, if you come to us with another legal matter and you'd like advice on, we may be able to refer to other solicitors in legal aid, such as if you had a family law matter or an issue with your veterans entitlements. So we'll do our best to link you in with anyone who can help if that's a service that is available. The last point that I just want to touch on is that if you want to speak to a lawyer from our service, it will attract legal privilege, as Desmond said earlier. What this means is that your communications stay private. Us as lawyers are obligated to keep what you say private and confidential, and your information is legally protected, so it can't ever be used against you in a court. That protection can only be lost in very limited circumstances, such as if you were seeking advice about how to commit a crime. But if that's ever a concern for you, please let us know and we can cover that in further detail with you.
Thank you so much, Jacinta. Really appreciate that information. We'll next be hearing from Nick. Nick is our advocate working in DAVLS as a community engagement officer. Nick will speak to us about plans DAVLS has for community outreach.
Thank you, Marina. Yes, my background's in veterans advocacy, and I'd like to just make a few points about our team first. We've attracted a lot of very passionate people, many with absolute expertise in Royal Commissions, but also people with lived experience. We've done a lot of training to ensure that the service we give is truly trauma-informed. We've done training in how to hold conversations with people in distress, how to minimise the distress that people may experience in reliving traumatic experiences. And the team has a number of supports around it. And I know a number of people in our audience are also doing this work, and I hope you also are reaching out for support, because this work can be quite confronting. Our aim is to make the service as accessible as possible, and part of that is to reach out in as many ways as we can. The information line is probably the easiest way to connect with us. It's 1800 33 1800, and we've got very compassionate people on that call. Our first phone call is quite brief. We get an idea of some of callers' contact details, the issues that they face, and organise for a lawyer's appointment at a prearranged time that suits the caller. But we also have web resources. Our website has a contact email where people can make their first contact with us just by the email if they wish, but they can also access directly at some resources. There are particular fact sheets on some of the issues that Jacinta just covered about confidentiality, private hearings, what happens to your information. But there's also a very useful how-to guide on writing a submission. And I think both agencies supporting the military community and members of the military community themselves will find that very useful. As I say, we are trying to be as accessible as possible, and part of our plan is outreach to the plethora of agencies that provide advocacy and support to veterans, and this webinar is an example of that. We're also developing community legal education materials, which will be rolled out next year and for the duration of the commission. We are looking to go into communities before the commission arrives to hold hearings, and to empower local people to engage how they want to engage with the commission. We're also very interested in feedback from the services network about what they're hearing about our service. Are we achieving our goal of a trauma-informed and accessible service? Are there additional things we could do to be working with the veteran support networks and the ex-service organisations? And our main aim is to ensure that the Commission hears all the material that we know is in the community. Many people who have held on to their stories for decades without sharing it. This is a big step, and so our aim is to be as supportive as possible and to make it as easy as possible for the military community to make their voices heard. It's only through that the Commission has said that we will really get the recommendations that will make a change in this issue. Thanks, Marina. I think you're on mute, Marina, but I think you asked me how to connect. There's a couple of ways.
How to refer.
The best way is just our info line. The staff are very experienced. They can give initial information, and most importantly, they can make an appointment with the lawyer. And that's where you can really explore the depth of issues that you may be facing around your engagement with the Commission. The other is our website at defenceveteranslegalservice.org.au. I would encourage interested parties to sign up for our occasional newsletters. We'll be publishing the things that we learn through the Commission process. We'll be reporting on the work we're doing, the sorts of issues that are coming up, and the sort of solutions that are available. And if you'd like to contact us directly, there's an email address there as well. Please feel free to reach out to connect with us on any issue of your concern around the Commission, and particularly with any feedback for us or ideas for things that we could do better. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, Nick. We'll now be going through our questions that have been asked throughout the session. But I think one of the main ones that keeps coming up is, at what point can family members making, what is the point of which family members making submissions to the Royal, when they can make submissions to the Royal Commission? Sorry, hello?
Yeah, was the question,
Sorry.
what's the point of family members making submissions, or when can they?
Sorry, I misspoke. What is the point of family members making the submissions to the Royal Commission?
Okay, I'm happy to crack at this one first. For family members, they often see a unique side of the individual's experience as they're grappling with poor mental health that can then potentially result in suicide attempts. And so a family member being able to provide their own perspective of the context, their own insight to what that person was going through, their perspective on what triggers were responsible or partially responsible for poor mental health outcomes. That's why the Royal Commission is seeking to get perspectives from family members. Another way of looking at it is the issue is so multifaceted that a family member can shine light on one angle that a person who's lived in it may not be able to see, because they're coming at it from a completely different angle. So it's all useful. Is there anything you, Jasmine or Nick, wanted to add to that?
Yeah, could I add, in the Commission's terms of reference, they've thrown the net very widely, and it's an acknowledgement that families also have a lived experience of being part of the military community. There's separations from loved ones, there's moves for postings, there's a lot of factors that family members themselves have to offer, as well as their insights on the experience of the military person themselves. So I think it's important to note that the Commission wants to hear what you want to say, and families have got a lot of insights that will only be heard by the Commission if the families themselves speak up.
Sorry, and the Commission won't dismiss family member submissions as being hearsay?
No. The story is their story, and the Commission will hear it. There aren't the same rules of evidence, etc. So yeah, no, everybody's story is valid, and everybody's story is important for the Commission to hear.
And as Nick said, because the rules of evidence don't apply to Royal Commissions, the hearsay rule doesn't apply.
Thank you. Yasmin, do we have any other questions from the audience?
Yeah, we've got a few that have come in. Some may have been answered before, but we might just touch on it again. The first one is, if someone has written a submission, but they're struggling to go over it and reread it and actually determine what it is they want to submit, is that something that the service can help with, actually reading it and going over it and determining what is the best thing to submit and how to submit it?
Yep, I've helped a number of my clients to do that. And we're very conscious that it can be quite a battle to get some of this stuff down on paper. And so we're more than happy to get the first rough draft from you and go through it with you and tidy it up.
And the only thing I'd add to that, is that given that we have social workers on the team, we also acknowledge that it can be very difficult to get it down on paper. So if you need a bit of time, we can break it up over a number of appointments. And if you need to link in with someone afterwards to debrief, that's something that we can assist with as well.
And Jacinta, you mentioned this in one of the slides. If you have signed something like a non-disclosure agreement or a contract saying that you can't talk about a certain situation, if you're then asked by the Commission about that situation? Are you allowed to speak about it?
So the answer to that isn't black and white, and it will depend on the terms of any non-disclosure agreement, because they're all different. So sometimes non-disclosure agreements will have an exception that you can't talk about something except as required by law, and there are ways for the Royal Commission to compel you to provide information, which would then mean that you're not breaching the NDA. But similarly, some NDAs only prohibit you from talking about the actual settlement itself, not the actual subject matter of the dispute. So if you have signed an NDA, we would ask if you feel comfortable to share the wording of the NDA so we can have a look at it. If the NDA is, however, extremely broad and prohibitive and says that you can't share information, there are ways to share information with the Royal Commission where you'll have legal protections so that information cannot be accessed by anyone nor used against you in a court. So potentially, whilst you may still be in breach of an NDA, it would be very difficult for anyone to find out what you've said or try to take legal action against you. But we would need the individual to speak to us directly and would provide that advice in the specific situation.
Right. And a lot of people are asking for in-person support to get their submission together. Do you offer in-person support?
Yes. Obviously, COVID dependent, location dependent. If someone is in a area outside of a main city, it might be that we can't get to for a little while, but we'll endeavour to reach everyone and provide face-to-face appointments for anyone who wants them. Obviously, COVID dependent.
And in the private sessions that you mentioned in one of the slides, does private sessions cover exemption from exposed criminality?
So with private sessions, in fact, any means of engaging with the Royal Commission, they have the power to share information with law enforcement. This power is worded so that they can share information if it deems it appropriate. So if an individual is disclosing matters which may impute them as having committed a crime, the Royal Commission can share that with police, regardless of if it's shared in a private session or not. So for anyone who is worried, we would have a chat with you about how you could manage the flow of information if that's a concern for you, and make sure that you're fully aware of the powers that the Royal Commission has to share information.
Great. And what assistance are you offering for people with disabilities?
Well, having previously worked on the Disability Royal Commission for the last 15 months, I can say myself and the other lawyers who've also crossed across both, we can provide any accessibility requirements that you would like. We can get Auslan interpreters. I've had clients with hearing impairments where we've provided advice solely by email. For clients who've preferred Auslan interpreters, we've facilitated face-to-face with the Auslan interpreter. For clients with intellectual disabilities, we've worked to create easy read documents to help them to break down the legal content as it's delivered. So we're very happy to work with the individual to come up with a means of delivering the advice that's accessible.
Great. I'll just double check if there's any other questions.
There is one about perhaps what happens when someone first calls up through the hotline number. What's the process? We understand that from what Nick said, that it's a very brief conversation, but in that brief conversation, is an appointment made?
Would you like me to take that one, guys? Okay, so if it's contact through the telephone line, was that the question?
Yes, so through the 1300 number.
Okay.
Sorry, the 1800 number.
Lovely. So that goes to Legal Aid Queensland, and they're responsible for our client intake line, and they employ people who are able to speak with the person about what their needs are. So they'll ascertain what assistance the person needs and identify a lawyer who's best able to help them. and then book them in for that appointment. And as part of that conversation, the client information officer will also ask questions about their preferred method of contact and their preferred mode of receiving that advice. So whether they would prefer face-to-face advice or whether they would like to have some kind of a video conference call or some other way of interacting with their lawyer. Does that answer that one? Any other follow on from that?
I might.
If someone isn't sorry, go ahead, Jacinta.
Oh, I was just going to add that we as lawyers get these referral forms from the info line with a summary of what's been disclosed in that call. Some of them are quite brief and some of them have more information, and it doesn't matter how much information you feel like giving in that first intake call. We can provide the advice either way.
And if someone isn't certain about making a submission to the Royal Commission just yet, do you recommend that they call the number to make sure that, number one, can you help them, and number two, if it's appropriate for them to make a submission?
Absolutely. So we can always give advice about that. So there's no one that we wouldn't be able to give advice to about that issue. And at the end of the day, it's up to the person to make a decision about whether they do or don't want to get involved. And it's our job to explain the options and explain the pros and cons of each option.
Fantastic. Yasmin, do we have any other questions? Fantastic. So I would like to thank everyone for attending today and for the very insightful questions that we've had, and for the and also thank our panelists for joining us and providing the information about the Royal Commission. Today's webinar is recorded, so if you would like to go back and view it again, you can do so on our Legal Aid YouTube channel. The number for the Defence and Veterans Legal Service is also on the screen, 1800 33 1800, and this is again free legal help. So there has been a lot of information to absorb, and we'll just like to point out that in the handout tabs, there are 2 handouts available, which is number 1, a submission guide, and number 2, a brochure for the service. Also, through the registration, we have seen lots of services stating that they are volunteering to assist people with their submissions. We would highly appreciate it if you could get in contact with us through the survey that would be sent out to you shortly after the webinar, to let us know if you would like a drafting workshop for services assisting people make submissions. So please let us know if that would be something that your service would like to engage with, and we hope to get back to you shortly after that. If you have any questions about this webinar, please email your questions to Defence Vets Legal at Legal Aid. So that's DEVENCVETS LEGAL at qld.gov.au, and we'll be in touch. And again, this for anyone that feels distressed by this webinar, we highly encourage you to make contact with counselling and support services that are on your screen. Again, thank you for joining us today, and we would love to hear from you. Thank you.